Welcome to the C-Suite Series presented by Channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Noble is an SEC-registered FINRA-licensed broker-dealer and the source of the equity research available on Channelchek. Of the 6,000 small and microcap companies listed on the site, today we're featuring Ayala Pharmaceuticals. Ahu Demir, Noble's biotechnology research analyst covering the company, will be interviewing CEO Roni Mamluk. Afterwards, she will be joined by Michael Kopinski, Noble's Director of Research, to discuss the key takeaways. As a reminder, Ahu's research is available at no cost on Channelchek. Just type in Ayala in the top left company data section. And now, here's Ahu and Roni.
Hello, today we are interviewing with Ayala Pharmaceuticals and the CEO Roni Mamluk is with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Roni, today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting us to talk. It's a pleasure.
Likewise, pleasure is ours. So I'll start with just a high overview of the company's current portfolio. So why don't we talk about the current portfolio, highlighting the various indications that are in play currently?
Great. So Ayala is a company focusing on oncology. And within oncology, we have taken the approach to target very specific biology. Our portfolio currently has two different products. Both of them are targeting the biology of an enzyme called gamma secretase. And we are using this biology to target several different cancers. So we have a program on our lead product, AL101. This is development. Phase 2 study in a rare cancer, adenoid cystic carcinoma. And, I'll explain more about this cancer later on. Then we have also an open study in a somewhat of a larger indication or cancer, although also very focused and rare, called triple-negative breast cancer. And we plan by end of next year to open a study in a third cancer called TALL or T-cell lymphoblastic leukemia. In the three cancers that are there, gamma secretase is a key enzyme to control a receptor that is called Notch, and Notch has been shown to be a driver for these cancers. In the two first cancers, ACC and triple-negative breast cancer, we are actually including patients in the study that have activating mutations in the receptor that is called Notch. And we have shown in preclinical models that this is part of what drives the cancer. And also there are a lot of published information on that. The second product is developed in two different avenues. One, we are on track to open a study in the first half of next year in the cancer called desmoid tumors. There also Notch has been shown to be part of the driving force of the cancer. But we also have a partnership with Novartis for multiple myeloma. And that's because the gamma secretase is an enzyme that is involved in controlling BCMA, which is a protein that is expressed on the cells of multiple myeloma. And targeting this protein has been recently an attractive way to try and treat the multiple myeloma tumor cells and eliminate them. So the partnership is to combine our AL102 second product with Novartis anti-BCMA treatment in an attempt to improve and strengthen the anti-tumor effect of the anti-BCMA treatment. So that's where we are.
That sounds great, Roni. So I think just as a natural progression of talking about the story, I think it will be helpful for our audience to know about gamma secretase and Notch inhibition, and maybe a little bit of the history of the gamma secretase inhibitors that has been actually previously developed in the clinic. So can we just have maybe elaborate on the mechanism of action and how the inhibitors work?
Okay, great. So our molecule AL101 and AL102 are small molecules, and they inhibit the activity of gamma secretase enzyme. Gamma secretase is an enzyme that sits in the membrane and cleave notch, a receptor called notch. And this cleavage releases the notch intracellular domain, which is an essential and the initial part of activation of the notch pathway that activates the transcription and expression of downstream genes that in the case of cancer are pro-cancer. The notch activation was shown to enhance cell proliferation, migration, invasion. So inhibiting the enzyme prevent the cleavage of notch, and by that shutting down the notch pathway, inhibiting all the pro-tumor activities that the notch pathway would do. And a bit of history. So gamma secretase inhibitors were developed by different pharma companies. BMS developed AL101 and AL102. They developed them and were able to generate what seems to be the most potent gamma secretase inhibitors. They developed the two molecules for cancer, for oncology. And we in-licensed the products from BMS after they have completed preclinical studies as well as phase 1 studies. And we have changed the approach in our phase 2 studies to focus on those tumors where notch has been shown to be activated and driving the tumor progression.
That sounds great. It was helpful, Roni. So I think if you would start with AL101 and start with the lead indication, adenoid cystic carcinoma, what stage you are in the development and also what data you have received. And also it would be very helpful to get some information on the indication, standard of care, and how you fit into the competitive landscape.
Okay, great. So first of all, we are in phase 2 study, the phase 2 study. This study we have reported most recently in the fall in ESMO, where we have reported that there is anti-tumor activity. We have seen efficacy and we have seen 68% of disease control rate. So this composed of partial responses as well as stable disease. So that's for ACC. What's important to understand in ACC, in this cancer, it's a cancer that starts most times starts in salivary glands, and patients who are diagnosed will undergo most times resection, and in 50% of cases this is curative. However, in those patients where the disease will return and recur, it is not sensitive to current treatment. The disease will recur many times as metastatic disease, either locally metastatic or goes to lung, bone, liver, and it is not sensitive to chemotherapy. Many different treatment modalities have been tried. None of them have been approved as treatment. So actually, standard of care for patients with recurrent and metastatic disease is to try whatever possible, but there are no approved therapies. So the unmet need is very significant. I will add to that those patients that have notch activating mutations have a much more aggressive tumor. So for those patients, tumors, based on data that were published before in very prestigious and known sites in the US, like MD Anderson, like Sloan Kettering, what they were able to see is that in patients that have the notch activating mutations, the tumors will recur threefold faster than for those patients that don't have notch activating mutations. And unfortunately, also in correlation to that, patients' overall survival is fourfold shorter if they have notch activating mutations. So a very aggressive tumor. In our study, we are enrolling patients in the phase 2 study with notch activating mutations that have shown disease progression within 6 months from study initiation. So patients are entering the study with a progressive disease, and we are then starting the treatment. The fact that we have responses per RECIST is very encouraging, and we have seen deep responses. But also those patients that have stable disease, in essence, we are changing the course of the progression, because remember, patients are entering the study with progressing, where the tumor is progressing and is growing, and if you are able to stop the progression, that's also a benefit from the perspective of the patient.
And considering, so moving on to the next question, Roni, considering the unmet needs and the lack of standard of care in the refractory and resistant patients in ACC landscape, what would be the next steps for AL101 to get to path to the approval in this indication? I believe you have certain designations that could accelerate the approval, and also you received some compelling data, as you mentioned, at ESMO with 68% overall response rates. So what will be the next steps in carrying the strategies to move the inhibitor into the markets, commercialization?
So we did have 68% disease control rate, and we are continuing the study. The study is now enrolling into the second dose out of 2 that are tested in this study. So this is the 6 milligram dose. And depending on the results of this ongoing study will be the next step. So there are two different, there are a few different options. One of the options, if the response rate will be sufficient and the duration of response sufficient, and when I'm saying sufficient, we have spoken to the KOLs, to the physicians, to the investigators, and they've told us that with about 50% or higher disease control rate and a duration of response of 4 to 6 months, they believe this will have sufficient benefit for patients that they will go and discuss and join us in discussing with the FDA the path forward. Whether this study, as is, can become a pivotal study or not will depend eventually on the data and on the feedback we will receive from the FDA. It is premature at this time to say whether this will remain a phase 2 study and then have another study which is a phase 3, or this study as is may have the potential under an accelerated path to become a pivotal study. We do not know that yet.
Okay, that does make sense. And since ACC is a rare indication, you are moving forward. This is the most advanced indication. However, beyond ACC, you are discovering other opportunities, much larger and more competitive indications that are expected to initiate in the short to medium term. So I'm curious, what other indications are there and how you see AL101 fitting into those landscapes?
Right, so I'll start with triple negative breast cancer. Triple negative breast cancer is, I think many people know, it's a very aggressive type of breast cancer. And patients who are diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, even these days, they eventually will die from that cancer. So there are, the cancer responds to therapy, to chemotherapy, for example, and there have been new treatment that have been approved recently, like PARP inhibitors and other ones. However, patients will respond and then progress. So patients are going through several lines of therapy. So that's TNBC, triple negative breast cancer. What also was shown in this tumor is that there is a correlation between Notch activating mutations and poorer prognosis. So Notch seems to play a role as an oncogene in this tumor once it's mutated. So we have opened a study recently and hope shortly to enroll the first patient in the study. And there also we are selecting for patients with Notch activating mutations or fusions using next generation sequencing assay that have been adapted to detect Notch and mutations and fusions. So that's the triple negative breast cancer. The additional indication you mentioned, the TALL, it's actually a small indication as well. However, also there are lines of therapy. However, there is still a significant unmet need with regard to cure. And Notch have been shown to be an important driver of that cancer. There have been also a study conducted by BMS in a phase 1 study that showed a handful of complete responses. And therefore, we believe there is a potential there to have for AL101 to have benefit also for that patient population. I'm thinking, was there another thing to add on this indication? No. One thing to note, actually, that I forgot to mention on triple negative breast cancer is that indeed there are treatments for triple negative breast cancer that have been approved. Many of them are chemotherapy based. There is the only approved therapy that is not chemotherapy based for triple negative breast cancer is the PARP inhibitors. And this is only in those patients with the BRCA gene, the BRCA mutations. Talking to the investigators and to KOLs, what they have said is that the potential to have a targeted therapy that is not chemotherapy based for patients who have the Notch mutations is an attractive opportunity, and they've been very excited to join us and to test whether indeed this will bring benefit to patients, because they said you have the potential to avoid the chemotherapy side effects with such an approach.
That's actually very compelling for patients. So I think it's important to highlight Ayala's strategy implementing using gamma secretase inhibitors for specifically Notch activating mutated patients and selecting those patients in those larger or small but with large percentages of Notch activating mutations are the key and the strategy that you actually implement to carry and commercialize, advance the pipeline assets. So that's a great way to emphasize it. So my next question will be moving into AL102. And you have a really strong partnership with Novartis. You quickly mentioned the anti-BCMA coupling with gamma secretase inhibitors. Can we talk about the scientific and clinical rationale behind this? And also maybe a little bit information on the competitive landscape, because as far as I know, there are multiple other partnerships and other developments in the sector that has been coupling anti-BCMA with GSIs.
Right. Yes. So with BCMA, gamma secretase is also the enzyme that cleaves BCMA. In this case, it removes it from the cell surface of the multiple myeloma cells. So if a company is developing, like Novartis and others, a therapy that is targeting BCMA the removal of BCMA is a problem because you have less BCMA on the cell surface, so less ability to target the tumor cells. And also there is there is more floating BCMA in the circulation that can trap the therapy, can kind of decoy, serve as a decoy for the tumor cells. AL102 inhibits gamma secretase and by that prevents the shedding of BCMA from the cells of the multiple myeloma cells. So treating the cells with AL102 increases the level of bound BCMA, allowing now the anti-BCMA treatment at much lower concentrations to have an effect on the tumor cells. So the idea is to combine these two and enhance the anti-BCMA effect of the therapy being developed by Novartis. So that's the biology behind it. And we have been partnered with Novartis for early on, and they have taken the approach. Currently, they have a bispecific antibody that is in phase 1. And the plan is that at the right time, AL102 will be combined into that study. The competition, there is another gamma secretase inhibitor that is developed by SpringWorks. It was originally developed by Pfizer and was out-licensed to SpringWorks. And they're also partnering with different companies that have an anti-BCMA approach. So that's the competition. We have the exclusive relationship with Novartis for AL102 and the Novartis approach. And we trust Novartis to be, not just to be a great partner, but hopefully, to be able to come with the right approach to target BCMA.
That's a very important partnership, I believe, especially considering the first anti-BCMA approval to come to the market next year. So that will be very exciting to see the data coming out from that trial. So moving into the next indication for AL102 is the desmoid tumor. So can we have some information on standard of care, market, and also the competitors in this landscape for AL102, and also what stage of development you are in and what are the next steps for this program?
Yes, of course. So desmoid tumors are also rare tumors, and they originate from connective tissue. They are aggressive, but they are not metastatic. And again, very limited therapeutic options. Patients are going through multiple surgeries to remove the tumors, but many times they do not have, there's no FDA approved therapy for desmoid tumors. And in desmoid tumors, there have been data that were generated both by BMS with our molecules and also by Pfizer and SpringWorks for their molecule that shows that indeed inhibiting gamma secretase seems to have a good effect on reducing desmoid tumors and on treating desmoid tumors. And SpringWorks are now in a phase 3 study, so they are more advanced than our program. We are en route to initiate our phase 2 study in early next year, like the first half of next year. So depending on how things will pan out, we may be able to become second in the market. We don't know what will happen with SpringWorks. They have not reported yet the data. And what we can say is that at least in vitro, when we are, the potency of the molecules is compared, it seems that AL102 have a higher potency in vitro to the molecule that has been developed, that is at SpringWorks. And another difference is the dosing regimen. So it seems that SpringWorks dosing is twice daily. And we are not yet sure whether it's going to be once daily or even less frequent for AL102 in the planned desmoid tumor study.
I see. So despite you might be second to the market potentially, you think the dosing schedule and also potency, efficacy would be helping you to gain market traction?
Look, efficacy for sure will help us, but we cannot predict that. So that's something that, yes.
Yeah, no, that's very understandable.
Yeah.
And so maybe can we talk about a little bit on the market capitalization? So you recently become publicly traded company, and
Yes.
you have some strong investment from Novartis and Bristol Myers based on your licensing agreements and beyond. So maybe it would help our investors, our audience, to talk about the balance sheet, your quarterly burn, and the capital structure on that sense.
Right. So actually, as of September 30th, we reported we had $48.8 million in cash, and that we guided that this should take us into the second half of 2022. And our current burn rate is about $7 million per quarter. So that's the guidance. And yeah, so that's where we are with the cash.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
So you're well capitalized to actually achieve the meaningful milestones, commencement of clinical trials, and carry on advancing clinical trials over the 12 to 18 months of timeline.
Exactly.
Okay.
And yeah, so we expect, as I said, to enroll the first patient in the TNBC study. We also expect in the first half of 21 to have to report from the ACC phase 2 study, now reporting from the 6 milligram dose. What we have reported until now was from the 4 milligram dose. So the higher dose will be reported in the first half of 21. As I said, we're going to initiate the desmoid tumor study, and then we hope to be in a position to report from the initial report from the triple negative breast cancer in the second half of 21, and also then initiate the TALL study. So a lot to do, and we are, very focused on execution to meet these goals in the coming year.
That sounds great. You already covered my next question regarding the catalyst, but maybe we should just highlight them again with the timelines. So what should the investors look for, and maybe why should they invest in Ayala Pharmaceuticals? Why is it a good time to do that? What are we watching for in the next 12 to 18 months?
Right. So we basically have multiple studies that will be ongoing in the next 12 to 18 months, and we will be reporting out of those studies as they are phase 2 studies. So from the ACC, we plan to report by mid next year, so first half of 21 on the data, additional data. By the end of 21, so the second half of 21, we plan to report from the triple negative breast cancer. So that's reporting from 2 different studies with AL101. And for AL102, we will be initiating the desmoid tumor study in the first half of next year. And then the collaboration with Novartis, we are unable to provide guidance on that because the study is being run by Novartis, and we are not, so we are unable to provide guidance on when will be data to report.
Sounds great, Roni. Thank you so much for your time. It was a particular pleasure to host a female CEO. We do not see as many of those, so thank you so much. And I think Ayala has a very compelling story, and I'm really excited to cover the company. And I think there are a lot to look for in the next 12 to 18 months. It's really exciting time. So thanks for your time and telling us about the story.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, a real pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ahu, these types of companies that cure cancers or are looking for cures for cancers are always interesting because there's so many people that are affected by cancer. My question is, how do you score the effectiveness of their treatment and how they're attacking the cancer?
Thanks for the question, Mike. Yeah, I think that will help our audience to understand as well. So as Roni mentioned, they are specifically targeting Notch activating mutation patients. So Notch pathway is very important, similar to RAS, as it got very popular over the few years. Notch activation is also seen in multiple cancer indications at various rates. It can change from 5% to 25% depending on the indication. So, and this Ayala's two assets, they are in-licensed from Bristol Myers, which previously could not meet the statistical significance in their clinical trials. And the reason for that was they did not select patients. So Ayala and SpringWorks also, two companies, and there's another private company, they are actually selecting Notch activating mutation patients. So it's a targeted therapy. Gamma secretase inhibitors work in Notch pathway, and they're selecting those patient populations. So if I have to talk about their efficacy, it will be certainly for the biomarker identified Notch activating mutation patients.
So Ahu, we're talking about rare cancer. So the next question would be, well, what is the market opportunity?
Yeah, that's also a great question, Mike. So when we talk about rare indications, a lot of biotech companies are going after those indications. Despite the market opportunity might be smaller, the major reason for that is it helps companies, provides companies to get to the market in a much accelerated path. So those rare indications have significant unmet need, no standard of care, and it helps companies to move to the market much quicker compared to other ones. And following gaining approval in those rare indications, companies expand to much larger, much bigger markets, as Ayala is also doing. They're going after adenoid cystic carcinoma, which is a rare disease. However, the second and third indications are larger, triple negative breast cancer, TLL. So I think that's a very common trajectory for biotech companies currently.
Well, it sounds very interesting and it sounds very promising. So thank you for bringing this company to us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you for your questions.
This has been the C-Suite Interview Series brought to you by Channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Log in to Channelchek or subscribe to our YouTube channel to get the full catalog of C-Suite interviews and virtual roadshow channelcasts. Register for Channelchek's no-cost premium content and receive notifications of new releases from both series. Thank you for joining us.